seminary. And as the fathers to be, I guess, because they're not really priests yet, are all in the seminary, and they've been there for months and months and months, and they're training, and they're going through their process. And it comes up after they've been there a year, they're going to get their final test, their final chance to prove that they're ready to move on to the priesthood. So they go out and they make all their vows, their vow of poverty, their vow of chastity, and all this kind of stuff. So they pull them out and they pull out this line. There's a half a dozen of these priests to be there, and they line them all up in a row. And the father comes out, and the other monks and the senior bishops and all that come out, and they say, it's time for your final test to see if you're ready to make it to the next step. So they say, first you all have to disrobe. And they go, oh, okay. So they all take their clothes off. And then the priests go down the line, and on the end of each guy's penis, they hang a bell. And the guys are like, what's this all about? So then out comes this naked woman and starts dancing in front of each of them. Dancing and dancing and dancing. And if they hear a bell ring, the guys are going to get thrown out because they have to prove this vow of chastity. So it comes out, dances the first guy, nothing. Comes out, dancing, second guy, nothing. You look a little further down though, the sixth guy in the row is starting to sweat. He's like, oh no. Come down to the third guy, nothing. Fourth guy, nothing. Fifth guy, nothing. Gets to the sixth guy, he's trying as hard as he can. Sweating, she's dancing. Finally, he gets this erection. Bell flies off. He gets such a huge erection, the bell flies off the end of his penis, lands out in the grass. And he's like, oh no. And all the other priests are kind of smirking, and they're like, you're out of here. And the guy runs out and goes, oh no, and he's sad, and he bends over to pick up his bell, and as soon as he bends over, you hear the other 5 bells ring.
A Frenchman, an Englishman, and a New Yorker get shipwrecked on a desert island.
Right.
And the natives of the island capture them and take them, and they say, okay, what we're going to do to you is we're going to skin you, and then we're going to cook you and eat you, and we're going to take your skin and we're going to make a canoe out of it. Okay? So they say, all right, you've got one last request.
Right.
So the Frenchman says, well, I would like the cigarette. And so they give him a cigarette, and he smokes it, and they skin him, they cook them, they eat them, and they make his skin into a canoe. And they get to the Englishman. The Englishman says, well, I'd like a pen and some paper, and so that I can write a letter to my wife and tell her what happened to me. So they give that to him, and he writes out his letter, and they skin him, cook him, eat him, and make his skin into a canoe. And they get to the New Yorker, and the New Yorker says, I want a fork. Do you heard me? I want a fork.
Right.
Well, I want a fork, okay? So they give him a fork, and then, they're kind of wondering why he wants a fork, and he starts just stabbing himself and jabbing himself all over, jabbing and, like, killing himself practically. He says, here's your fucking canoe.
There's this barn, right? And outside the barn, there's this cow put, and there are these 3 flies, this fly family. They land in the cow, and they start doing what flies do, And they're eating and eating and eating, and after a while, they're all feeling really full. And they try and fly away, but they can't do it. They've eaten too much, right? So the papa fly says, well, we've just been eating too much. So he climbs up. There happens to be a rake there in the cow pie, and it's going up along the side of the barn. And he climbs up a little bit up the rake, and maybe a third of the way, and he jumps off. Flat. It dies. It's terrible. It's morning. The mama fly and the baby fly, they're upset. The mama fly says he just didn't climb high enough. And besides that, he weighs more. So she climbs maybe 2/3 of the way up the rake, right? And jumps off and splat. It's terrible. It's awful. There's mourning in the fly community, especially in the remaining orphan, who's the child. And he says to himself, well, they just didn't climb up high enough. So little baby fly climbs all the way up to the top of the rake and jumps off. Splat. It's the same thing. It's terrible. He also dies. And there's a moral to this story. You know what that moral is?
Surprise!
You know what the moral is?
No, I do not.
Don't fly off the handle if you're full of shit.
You know anything about property?
Yeah.
Just a lot.
So what do Michael Jackson and Walmart have in common? What do Michael Jackson and Walmart have in common? Boys' underpants are half off.
Yeah. There's a pirate. There's this pirate, and he's out walking. He walks into a bar one day. And as he walks into the bar, the bartender looks over, looks again, and sticking out of the pirate's pant leg is what appears to be a steering wheel. So the bartender looks over at the pirate and says, hey, what's that sticking out of your pant leg? He says, arr, it's driving me nuts.
He said, Dick and I and all the other guys grew up really poor in a bad section of Grand Rapids. And come Christmas time, it got cold and everything, but we didn't have money for heat, we didn't have money for new clothes, money for presents, things like that. And we'd all get bummed out around Christmas time. And so what Richard used to do was every November or December, he'd cut a hole in his pocket. And before I knew him very well, this is what Denny was saying, before I knew him very well, I wouldn't really ask him what was going on. He was a big guy, I didn't want to make him angry or anything. But it always seemed strange to me that he was cutting a hole in his pocket. So after the second year, I asked Richard, what the hell are you doing? Why are you cutting a hole in your pocket? And Richard said, well, we're all poor and we don't get many presents around Christmas time. So I cut a hole in my pocket so I'd have something to play with.
Husband and wife were out in the garden pulling weeds. Husband looked over at his wife and goes, your butt's getting kind of big. She didn't say nothing. She said, no, you know what? I'm willing to bet your butt is as big as the grill. Didn't say nothing, so he went out, grabbed his tape measure, measured her, measured the grill. To find out her butt was 1 inch bigger than the grill. So later on that night, he was snuggling in bed with her, trying to get him a piece. And she said, oh, don't you think I'm firing up this grill for one little weenie?
Why do lawyers tie their neckties so tight? In order to keep their foreskins from popping out.
A man was involved in an industrial accident and he got all his fingers cut off, went to the doctor's office and the doctor sewed them back on and he said, can you move your fingers a little bit? So I moved them a little bit and he said, that's good. And he said, well, the unfortunate news is I sewed the wrong fingers onto the wrong place, so I'm gonna have to cut your fingers back off and then re-sew them. And the guy goes, fuck you.
This woman is telling her friend about this new guy that she's been dating, and her friend says, well, how's it been going? And she says, well, it's been going pretty good, except I've been practicing how to give better hand jobs. And her friend says, oh yeah? How you been doing that? She says, well, I've been practicing on a ketchup bottle. Her friend says, okay, well, how's that been going? She says, well, it's been going pretty good, except to the part where I go.
Woman was flying first class, and she was sitting next to this guy on the plane. And every time she would sneeze, she'd shudder. So the guy looked at her and said, how come you shudder every time you sneeze? She said, well, every time I sneeze, I have an orgasm. I said, oh, really? What do you take for that? She said, pepper.
Alright, 3 guys get shipwrecked, see? And they thought it was a deserted island, but it turns out they're captured by savages. And they tie him up, and the chief walks up and he says, you have 2 choices. Death or Magumbo. The guy doesn't think it over long. He says, okay, Magumbo. And the whole tribe cheers. At which point they untie him. Every man in the tribe beats the shit out of this guy and anally rape him. They toss him out on the beach. Chief walks up to the second guy. Death or Magumbo? And that guy thinks it over a little while, but he decides to go for Magumbo. So they untie him, beat him, rape him, toss him on the beach. There's always three, right? Okay, so the third guy, he says, forget that. Hell no. I'll choose death. And the whole tribe cheers. The chief says, oh, fine. Death by Magumbo!